Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RoboReplay. In this one we'll be taking a look at what happened on the Daly division as 2056 ended up taking it away as the Alliance 6 captain. The finalist was with Alliance 5 and Alliance 6, not like any other field we've seen, with Alliance 1s and 2s mostly dominating. And check out what happened to Citrus's streak and how they ended up losing their Einstein streak of about like 10 plus years. I think it's like 12 or 13 at this point. And just seeing what happened to make this division so weird in terms of comparing it to every other Worlds division. Let's get into it. So starting off, before we get into this match, this is going to be the lower bracket match of the rematch of the first round 1 of Alliance 6 with 2056 and Barker, Nomad as well, against the Alliance 3 of the Citrus Alliance with 8-bit and then 5660. So starting off, something that I want to make very clear with how this division entirely worked, right? So what ended up happening was 4415 ended up ranking first. And so because they ranked first, they are a good robot, right? They are the 5th highest StatBotics EPA robot. They're not a bad team at all. But there were 4 teams on this division that everybody going in thought were going to pair up and sweep. And those being 1 being Citrus, 2 being 2056, and 3 and 4 being 1796 and then 694. So those 4, if you allowed any 2 of them to get together on an alliance, they would probably end up taking the entire thing very easily. So what ended up happening was the rankings ended up being 4415, 1796, and then 1678, and then there's a gap of teams here. 2056 at the 6th position, and then 694 was ended up 9th. So basically they couldn't decline if they wanted to for 4415 because there's a chance that they don't end up getting picked at all. So what ends up happening here is 4415 has 2 options here, right? They could either just pick someone that they know is going to accept at first and be like, okay, we don't want to embarrass ourselves because people will decline us, or they could burn the entire field. And they do the really smart choice strategically, which is burn the entire field. And what they do is they first asked 1678, right? They're asking 1678 saying, do you want to join our alliance? And if 1678 says no, then 1, you've already split up a pair, right? Citrus now can't be with 1796. And you've made it so that at least that alliance can't win the entire division. So now Citrus is locked in here. They can't be with anyone else. Then they ask 2056. And 2056 at this point is like, okay, do I want to be with 4415, who has maybe the 5th best robot, but then would allow 694 to be of 1796 and we lose the entire thing anyways? No, I can't do that. So we're forced to decline because otherwise 694 will end up getting picked by 1796 and then you lose the entire division anyways. So they say nope, they're locked into the 6th captain. And then they ask 694, who at this point is looking at this like, I can't decline. I don't know if there's going to be more in picking. So they have to say yes. They end up together. And then what you end up making is 4 different alliances that could easily win it all. And what ends up being the difference here in terms of how alliances get made, and the reason that Alliance 6 was actually favored in every single one of their matches according to StatBotics, is because of the way that triple offense works for elims. So when you get a really strong team like 2056 dropping down so far, right, the 6th captain, and you have a relatively deep field, it ends up being really advantageous for the 6th captain compared to like the 1st captain or the 2nd captain or 3rd captain to get their 2nd pick earlier, right? Because in Serpentine, it'd go 1, 2, 3, and then all the people in the middle, 6 first pick, and then 6 gets their first choice of 2nd pick, right? Compared to the other 3 big alliances of the 694, 1796, 1678. So they ended up pulling Nomad here, an absolutely insane 3rd pick, because of the fact that this field was just deep enough for them to get an absurdly good pick at 6th captain, and because of the fact that 2056 is still incredibly good, their alliance ended up being the highest EPA-wise alliance on the entire division. Because of the fact that in triple offense games, if your field is like deep enough, then being at a 6th captain and declining actually might be really advantageous for you. And we'll see the exact same thing happens on Curie division, which we'll check out after we finish the Daly division here. So with all that being said, let's get into this match and see how Alliance 3 ended up losing this match. So the first match, Alliance 3 ended up winning, and that caused this Alliance 6 to have to go through the entire finals from the lower bracket, which was absolutely crazy to watch. And so one of the biggest things comparing this Alliance 6 to this Alliance 3 at the end of auto here is that, so both of them have 2 algae in the barge, right? They are both have center autos where they're just trying to get rid of the algae, trying to make it so it's not the problem in telly. Smart choice. What you see here is that Barker has a 2.5 piece algae versus 9432 only having a 2-piece algae, or rather 2.3 if you want to count getting to the algae. So it already puts them ahead in terms of algae scoring because, they're already here. And another big thing is the fact that this Alliance 3 only ends up getting 3 plus 5 coral pieces on, versus the Alliance 6 being able to get 1 extra coral here, as well as matching the Alliance 3 in L4 coral. And this 1 extra piece is really important because of the fact that this 1 extra piece from auto has a telly point bonus of +2 compared to a telly cycle. So what you've essentially done is said you're already expected to win, and you're putting yourself up 1 cycle already that they're going to have to make up for L3. And then with that, because it's an auto bonus as well, you have a +2 added onto that, which is an L1. So you're essentially putting yourself up 2 cycles at the end of telly with coral alone, and then you're also pretty far ahead in terms of algae because of the fact that Barker has this algae over here. So, very just good auto decisions from Alliance 6 ended up with a very solid lead going into telly, and that's just what ends up happening here, right? You end up with Alliance 3 having to make up this algae deficit as well as the coral deficit here, and you can see that Citrus is getting a really hard time having to try to pick up algae off the ground. Both alliances are doing the same thing of we're trying to put algae on as fast as we can. Citrus ends up missing an algae. You can see the human player's reaction, right? Like, oh my god, we just gifted an algae to them. And that's basically what ends up happening in this match, right? You have 3 robots who are just better cyclers overall than the other alliance, and even though Citrus is an incredibly strong robot, they won't be able to make it the lead, as 2056 is one of the best individual robots in the world. And I mean, this alliance went to like top 3 on Einstein, so it is a very valiant effort by this Alliance 3, but they do end up losing this match just because of the fact that, this Alliance 6 is just incredibly good at scoring. And so we'll see that there's an algae rolling around here that they still have to collect, and while that algae is being rolled around, this Alliance 6 has already picked up the algae that was dropped and scored it. So they're up 3 algae cycles, they're up 7 coral cycles, and this Alliance 3 has to make up an extra L1 cycle on top of this to match the auto score. So they're really down, this is really a 32 to 24 in terms of telly cycles. So they're down 8 cycles right now in coral, they're down an algae as well, and they also are down the 8 points swing that you get from having an algae because of the fact that you lose -4 points max, you gain +4 points for your max total score that you can get. So it ends up just being everything snowballs out of control. And, there is a very valiant effort by this Alliance 3 here. But another big thing why you'll see that Citrus misses a piece here, right, on L1. Let's see how they score it on the right here. So you can see that they try to just drop it vertically, and then it slides one time. But this vertical drop is pretty inconsistent. They end up missing it the second time. And on the other side, you can see that, right, 2056 is just doing L1s, but the way that they're doing their L1 arm, they actually have gotten a pretty good finesse to it, where they're able to stack a solid amount of L1 pieces on the corner, right? So you can see they had 3 L1 pieces on this corner, and what they did was they just keep putting more on the corner so that they fall down, tumble over, and then they move to the other side where they can now stack more, and they just find good ways to fill in the gaps. So even though they do have a vertical L1 arm, I don't know how they do it, but they finesse their way into making it so that it falls over a whole lot more consistent than Orbit did on Einstein's, if you remember that. And so then going into 28 seconds, it's really just everybody's just trying to figure out how we're going to get the L1s on. You can see that everyone really on this field, on this alliance, is a vertical scorer, or rather a upward scorer, except they're dropping it on the side, so it makes it really consistent. You see 2 L1 pieces missed, and at this point, with 2 L1 pieces down, you're down 7 cycles already in coral. You're down 8 score because of you missed an algae, and they have an algae. and the point gap is just too large. And the only way that Alliance 3 could win this is just by bringing it over with maybe they missed 3 climbs, you get 3 climbs, and maybe it's doable, but this Alliance 6 climb game is incredibly strong, and they end up getting the climbs to win the match, end up sending Citrus home, not going on Einstein for the first time in 12 or 13 years, and just an incredible way that this Alliance selection has worked out. I think it's a great Alliance selection to look back on and see for any of your future events. If you're looking at a triple offense game, hey, maybe we can drop. If you're looking at yourself as the number 1 pick and you think that the field is deep enough, absolutely decline the number 1 pick robot if you don't think it's going to be advantageous for your Alliance. It could end up with you getting 2 absolutely insane picks compared to the other 2, and then if you do good enough, you match. You have these guys matching, then at that point it becomes a 2-2, 2-3 versus a 2-3 game, and Alliance 6's 2-3s were simply just better overall scores. So let's go into the finals, where I think that apart from the first match where Alliance 6 did end up doing a lot of missed cycles and just inconsistency overall, this was the closest match that Alliance 6 played until Einstein's. So let's check out how the Alliance 5 of this division, not any other Alliance that we talked about here that was going to be made of the top 4 robots, but the Alliance 5 ended up giving Alliance 6 a run for their money. Alright, so this Alliance 5 is made up of 179, 3173, 4655. These are all incredibly strong robots, but what you really want to notice here is how they do their autos, right? So on this side, you have the Barker robot doing as many algae as possible, but 179 is doing the lollipop auto. That's their strategy, right? When you're Alliance 5, we talked about it with 2056, you're able to get a really good second pick compared to all the alliances above you. So these guys were able to get 2 robots who had side autos that were pretty strong. And so 179 was able to do the lollipop auto, and what they do is they end up missing 1 piece here, but then they get 1, and then aren't able to get the last piece. And so what they end up with is they're only down 1 piece in auto, which is the L4 here that 179 misses, but otherwise they're staying pretty consistent in terms of auto, and because of the fact that Barker missed, they're only down 4 points and then the 1 coral in auto. So you can see same strategy from both alliances, right? Same thing we saw on Einstein. We are just running algae. Do not just deny all of the algae possible. Do not let anyone steal it. Get it out of the way first. And then as soon as you're done with that, we go score coral. And this is one of the biggest things with these alliances is the fact that they think the exact same way. And because of the fact that these guys were able to end up on a really relatively deep field, you end up with Alliance 5 and Alliance 6, who are both have incredibly strong third robots, just battling it out. And this match ends up being really, really close. And you can see that what 2056's strategy is the exact same as Madtown did, right? You trust your 2 partners because they're so strong to fill the entire reef by themselves. And so what they're doing is they're just spending their time. They have the time to finesse the coral onto there from the corner, and they do a great job of managing to stack, right? You can't get the pyramids with the verticals, but if you can get the 2 and 2 on here, then it's incredibly powerful for making your max L1 go higher. And you can see, right, they do an incredible amount of trickery with this, right? They managed to put an L1 on vertically that falls sideways and then slides into the other one. I don't know, this obviously requires an incredible amount of practice with your robot, but it is just so impressive that they are able to take what was a weakness for the Einstein Alliance finalists and turn it into almost a strength because of how good their driver skill is and how their robot functions in terms of the arm geometry and everything. And so at this point, you can see that this Alliance 5 is up in points. However, if we look at the cycles and we look at the way that 2056 is playing, right, the cycles are really what determine if you're up or not. We can see that this Alliance 6 has allowed Alliance 5 to make it look like they're up because Alliance 5 has been focusing only the entire reef the entire time. And so now they're filled with the entire reef, and now they have to move to L1s. But Alliance 6 knows they're going to fill the reef and have left this entire backside open. And so this is plus 5 compared to So every cycle that Alliance 6 does on this algae, on this reef with the branches, is going to be worth more points and will bring this score way closer. So you give Alliance 5 a false sense of security. Maybe you make them go climb earlier because they think they have a lead, they just want to confirm it, and then you pull it back by just scoring inside all the branches, and then just make the point total go much, much closer. You make it a lot closer. Maybe you end up pulling out a win at the end. But we see at the side here, right, 179 has the very similar type of scorer, and these other two robots have sideways scorers, which these guys do a pretty good job of doing a similar thing to 2056 of trying to put it on. But what you end up seeing happening because of 179's arm is they knock off this L2 coral, which is going to end up being a really big problem, as now they have to score it back, right? So you've essentially taken a solid amount of time. Maybe you could have done one or two L1 cycles at that time to just put a piece back on. And because of that, you can see that the score is now Barker's going to and OP are going to stack on 2 at the end, and those 2 L1 pieces are going to end up determining the match. As with everybody climbing at the end, it ends up deciding the match. Those 2 pieces at the end being the determinant of who wins this match and who doesn't, because of the fact that, hard geometry with scoring L1s. And you can see that 2056, with an incredible amount of driver skill, driver practice time, is able to finesse the L1s on really, really well. Whereas, one mistake on Alliance 5 ends up costing them the match, sadly. But Alliance 5 does an incredibly valiant effort here, right? You look at how much these guys filled up the reef. This is Einstein level reef performance, right? Like, in terms of actual cycles, they're putting up close to the max of what you could be doing. The maximum is only it's less than 8 or 9 cycles away from this. So Alliance 5, props to them. When they were playing at their peak in this match, they did incredibly well, but Alliance 6 ended up taking it away from them. And then in the next match, a lot of things go wrong. I assume some breakages, which is why the score is a lot bigger. But this Alliance 5 was really, really strong and absolutely deserved to be on this final on Daly. And I think how these Alliance 5 and Alliance 6 ends up really shows you that on Worlds Divisions, in triple offense games, if you're able to get a really strong captain as your captain and on a lower alliance, then you can absolutely take any alliance for a run for their money, even if they are the 1 and 2. But this all depends on how deep your field is. Now, let's check out what a similar thing that happened on Curie, as Curie didn't send their Alliance 1, didn't send their Alliance 2, they ended up sending their Alliance 5 to Einstein's, which I thought was really interesting, so let's take a look at how they ended up doing that. So, I want to set the stage here before we look at this actual match here and how the Blue Alliance ended up pulling away with this, and the Alliance that ended up going to Einstein's ended up pulling away with this. And we'll be taking a look at the StatBox page, and obviously I know StatBox isn't the most reliable thing in the world, but it is a pretty good comparator for alliances in terms of here. So you can see that Alliance 1 has a 71% win probability. Their robots are predicted to just absolutely stomp compared to Alliance 2. Projected winner, right? What they predicted was that Alliance 1 would end up completely sweeping in terms of telly. They predicted that they would sweep in terms of auto, and then they predicted that it would be even in endgame, right? Triple climbs for every single alliance, as triple climb is how you're supposed to play it. So, if we look at the actual score, it's a pretty solid estimation for the Alliance 1, right? They do end up beating Alliance 2 in terms of auto, but if we look at the telly, they are much, much lower in telly compared to what they were predicted to be, and let's see exactly why that is. So let's get into this match here. This is going to be the Alliance 1 versus Alliance 5 we talked about on StatBotics, and let's see exactly what Alliance 5 does to end up pulling out the win here by a very small margin. And going into this, Alliance 5 knows that they're not expected to win, but what Alliance 5 has done, and what I think 166 has done on their backup robot, because I know that 166 has made the strat up because, I talked to their team, but what they did was they ended up deciding that they wanted to figure out a way to shut down the Alliance 1 and just make it so that, it's not a triple offense game. And so if you look at this and be like, how can we make this not a triple offense game, then you're really just looking at, okay, what can we do to shut down one of the opposing side robots? And so I don't know how Alliance 5 do this. If we're being honest, 3005 did this a couple of times in their Texas finals where they ended up winning everything, but they didn't do it in playoffs here. So unless this was a hard read by the Alliance 5 just on how to just if 3005 does this thing, then we do this, then I don't know how Alliance 5 knew this. But what they did was took algae off all on this side, right? And you're leaving one singular algae for RoboChargers to come get. Because what they did in that Texas finals that I'm talking about is they stole an algae off of the other Alliance side. They went all the way to the other side, they stole an algae, and then they came back and scored it. And so what Alliance 5 does is say, okay, go score it. But you guys can pick up the algae. Go for it. And with the Alliance 5 captain, 1771, they let them in, and they absolutely demolished them on defense. This was incredible to watch. And I'll just let this play out for you. RoboChargers does a pretty solid job of trying to get out here, but 1771 does a great job using the wall and using the same thing that 321 does, right? Use the wall as your advantage. You make sure that you have bumper to bumper contact, flat side on flat side, and do not let these guys leave. And one of the biggest reasons why RoboChargers get shut down for such a long amount of time, and why Alliance 1 ends up losing this, is because of the fact that 1771 is so good at driving, and also because of the fact that there's blue reef zone here, right? All of this area is blue reef zone, meaning that if RoboChargers ever tries to go around this way and tries to get it just from someone else, then you end up getting free fouls on them because you can be in the reef zone. They'll hit you as you're going, and then you get points. They don't, not points going away from you. And so this strategy in general, the fact that 1771 was just willing to do this as the very obviously strongest robot, as you know, this alliance was actually built in a very similar way to 2056, where it's 1771, a very strong robot, declines an Alliance 2, or Alliance 3 rather. So, you know, Alliance 5's best scorer giving up scoring for a very solid amount of match just to remove 3005's scoring is very, very impressive, just in terms of like captain having a very open mind of strategy. And so what they've ended up doing is saying, okay, it's now the Alliance 1 captain and 4020, the Alliance 1 third pick, so theoretically the 24th best robot on the field, versus our two picks of Alliance 5, 3478, and then 3276. And so what you end up seeing is basically this match just comes down to, can the Alliance 1 captain and Alliance 1 third pick outscore the Alliance 5 second pick and Alliance 5 third pick? And so one of the biggest reasons why they end up not being able to do this, and if we looked at auto, there was actually an Alliance 1 had a Coral lead in auto that ends up getting made up here, and that's entirely due to the fact that this Curie division's OPR is so interesting. So if you look at the Curie division, the way that it worked in terms of OPR was just going into the event was that most divisions looked like this, right? You have rising pretty much, and then there's a really big spike at the end. But what Curie was that compared to like the rise and then the spike, this division had way higher, but it flatlined, and then the spike was only a mini spike in terms of OPR for teams across the entire division, right? So what this meant is that there's a lot of teams in this middle range that are really, really strong and are very comparable to some of the best teams in the division. And so because of that, this Alliance 5 with 1771 ending up being a fifth captain ends up picking two incredibly strong robots. 3276 is their first pick, 3478 Landbot is their second pick. God knows how they were available. Their stats were incredible on this field. I don't know how they were still there, but congratulations to them. You know, first Mexican team that ends up going to Einstein. This Alliance 5 will be the Einstein representative, Sir Curie, and doing a really good job. They end up being a fourth place, I think, on there. So this alliance is no slouch by any means, but the way that they got here is they had their captain play defense on Alliance 1 to even it out. And we see that, you know, when you're playing defense on them, 3005 could easily get out at this point. But 3478 does a great job picking up the defense that 1771 throws to them and does the great strategy of, you know, same idea. We are going to have our bumpers on the corner and you will not be able to push past us either way. You have to go back to the other side. And both these guys do this. You know, you see again, 3005 goes on 3276, another free foul for the Blue Alliance. And we'll see that the foul points end up absolutely killing this Alliance 1 at the end of this here. And, it's basically just a 2v2 at this point, right? 3005 is just kind of sort of in the way. At this point, they've just given up. They're trying to block some coral coming out from ground intake. And one of the biggest reasons why this Alliance 1 ends up actually losing is the fact that both these guys are funnels, right? No one on their alliance has a ground intake, and 3276 over here has a ground intake that they can very easily use, and they're using it very well to just pick up pieces off the reef. They have virtually no cycle time and are comparable to 7457, the Alliance 1 captain, because of the fact that their cycle time is so low because they don't have to move at all for scoring, because the coral's just on them. And so this goes on. This defense is just incredible. 3005 is doing their best to push, but 1771, drive base, drivers, absolutely incredible for defense as well as offense. And they just completely locked down 3005. And closer to the end here, we'll end up seeing that when the L1s start getting put on, right? You can see that some L1s get put on. One of the biggest reasons that Alliance 5 ends up doing really well in terms of L1 scoring is because of the way that their 1771 scores L1s, right? You can see that they are vertical when they're holding it for the coral, but they have a wrist that throws it on sideways, which allows them to do a very similar thing to Madtown, right? You could just stack them on top of each other. It's very easy. And at the end of this, even though Alliance 1 had a lead going into the teleop, the Alliance 5 ends up making that up and actually going one coral above them because of the fact that, this Alliance 5 second and third pick are so incredibly strong, or first and second pick, rather. And so, at the end here, you can also see how Alliance 1 gets punished for not having 3005 on the other side. This algae is going to end up left here, unscored, because, 3005 is on the other side. They're not paying attention to it. They're just trying to get as much coral as they can at the end here on the reef, try to fill up all the branches, make sure that they don't end up with L1 scored and not all the branches done. But this ground intake on the other side, just absolutely piling on cycles. There's a reason 1771 is the strongest robot on this Alliance 5 and the captain. And they end up going into this end period with a lead of +1 algae, which that algae is from the processor score, right? So one of those algae is from the processor. But this unscored algae will end up making a huge difference, as well as the fact that they're also up 3 coral at the end here. And so if we look at the final score, at the end of this, everyone hits their climbs. Alliance 1 actually does a pretty solid job, right? In terms of scoring coral, they do a pretty decent job, right? It's for captain and a second pick versus a very strong second pick and a first pick, and they end up matching them relatively well. But Alliance 1 was up in terms of coral in auto, so the fact that they were outscored here just shows you how strong these two guys are in terms of just scoring. So at the end of this, you can see that, they're up at 2 points in terms of algae. That comes to the processor score. And the biggest reason why they end up losing this match is the penalties. You can see there's 8 points of penalties from a tech and a 2 for Alliance 1, but 14 points of penalties coming from 3005 just not being able to move at all. They end up sitting in the corner at the end of that after scoring a bunch of penalties because they've realized that they're just making up penalties, just trying to get out. And so at the end of this, it ends up being a 6-point gap worth of penalties. This could have been a 273 game. Still would have lost because of the fact that, the L1 game of this Alliance 5 is incredibly strong because of the way that 1771 and 3276 score L1s. But they do end up pulling out the win here and doing an absolutely incredible job. Congrats to them and a great strategy overall. Want to give props again to 166. Great strategy overall by the backup bot in just completely figuring out a way to demolish this Alliance 1, who is expected to get the high score on Einstein from StatBotics in this match. With that, that's going to be all for this episode of RoboReplay. I will be going over the Hopper division, as I loved watching that division. The finals of that were so interesting to watch. And as I also want to check out the Strike Force Auto Steel Algae in Einstein's as well, which I'll be doing in a video after this. So thank you for watching this episode, and have a lovely day.